Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar, or good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We have a record turnout for today's webinar looking at that view and lens of our 2026 trends looking into the world of what next, where next in active nutrition. I think it's important that we start on time, as we said we would do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and get started in terms of the presentation. So everyone should be able to see that now. So yes, we are looking at 2026 and beyond. And my name is Nick Morgan. We are presenting this, of course, on behalf of Nutrition Integrated, which is a data and insights company that specialize in products. Our lens is very much what is happening with categories, what is happening in products, and how do we see and understand, learn, adapt, and pivot based on what is coming into the market and also what is not, or what is leaving the market, shall we say. So if we get started, what I'd like to do, we've got a raised hand. Why have I got a raised hand, Birgitta? Um, maybe not meant to have a raised hand. Let's just go, maybe go carry on. So how I'd like to get started. We are all about active nutrition, as we've said. I'm going to present that to you shortly. We also always advertise this as trends done differently. Now, obviously, we make a big deal of that, but our biggest premise here is, of course, I genuinely believe trends are obvious. It doesn't take a genius to go, hey, I think people would like more natural products or maybe interested in plant and AI is a big deal at the moment. I think that we all sort of know that. The question that I'm always interested in is, what does that really mean? Or what can we learn from that so that we can build on what we're seeing in the industry and kind of create what's next? Because the scourge of our industries are actually very much a Me Too scenario. And I think we're an industry that does Me Too particularly well. So, of course, what we want to do is continue to push the boundaries of potential innovation and see where we can go to evolve the narrative into where it could go into the next sort of set of opportunities. But the challenge, of course, is we have a lot of change, we have a lot of evolution, we have a lot of democratization, which is one of my favorite words. So there's a lot happening at the moment. And I guess the challenge for everyone on this call, and the same for us on any project that we work with, is how to cut through that noise. So I think the challenge for you today is to think that through. Now, I always like to start by emphasizing what we mean by active nutrition. I won't labor on this because I think this is something that you'll have heard me talk through before, but just to indulge me on two slides, this is how we frame active nutrition. I think it's a better word in today's world for describing proactive or functional nutrition that could span the horizontal axis from performance through to health. So those that are more sport orientated, sports nutrition, through to those more health orientated. So you could just think of generic terms like gut health and brain health, for example. But also we are capturing products that very much form this vertical axis of science. So it's all about the ingredients and the benefits and the clinical studies all the way down to the enjoyment. And enjoyment is always anchored in taste and texture. Maybe people think about indulgence, but it's got to be something that people want to enjoy. Now, that access is actually labeled as accessibility, and you tend to be more niche at the top and more specific supplementary formats, of course. And on the bottom or nearer the vertical, it tends to be more food experiential products, certainly those that form the staples within the grocery aisle in our kitchen. So I suppose if you were to put this in more of a visual way, then we typically have the top left-hand corner over there is Steve Cook representing the sports or performance type orientation. And on the top right, we tend to see more vibrancy and functional nutrition. Of course, there is a bit of sporty connotation there, but exercise is more the common denominator. It's just a lot of people looking to be healthier. Bottom left is this incredible area that we tend to look at regarding energy, and it's quite vibrant over there. And of course, in here, the bottom right, you tend to see a lot of on-the-go food and snacks. Now, there is a much longer deck that sort of discusses and postulates what products and brands sit across this quadrant and whether brands can truly permeate and maintain a tether across ranges of products across any one of these quadrants. That is, can a brand be in the top left, but also win in the top right? I would say it becomes quite difficult. But that is our landscape of active nutrition. And therein, from this point on, the trends that I will discuss, I believe, are relevant in here. So it could go into an area of energy and drinks, for example. It might talk to you in the area of how we can live forever in longevity, but we're going to be spreading across that sort of quadrant as you see it. Now, the rules of the game are this. I will ask everyone on this call, I'm not literally, of course, but the rules of the game are this. Um, our trends are not supposed to be literal. You're not supposed to go there, brilliant, seen that, let me copy it. That would be not the point of this presentation. The point of the trends is to stimulate and to get you to think about what is it that we're learning? What do we see from this? What is it that we could therefore adapt or do better? Maybe you can take the learning and go into a complete different adjacency. And of course, therefore, what do you see that could drive evolution? And I always ask this same question at the beginning of presentations, particularly through this one, which is, what do you see on this slide? Now, you might see creatine infused coffee, and you might see creatine in a coffee Nespresso-like capsule. And that is perfectly correct because that is the visual literal interpretation of that slide. Now, it might mean, bloody hell, creatine's gone mainstream. We should do a coffee because someone else has done it. That is one interpretation. Unfortunately, that would fall into the bucket of being a me too. Or you could look at a number of things, which is that's interesting. Creatine is materializing in lots of different formats. I wonder if there's a better fitting format for it. Or maybe coffee is the carrier for functional ingredients because that's quite an interesting thing in terms of a ritual. Or maybe it is about the fact that maybe we should adopt a new format in the Nespresso capsules because that could be an avenue to which we could seek new function. That's the rules of the game. That is on you. That is not on me. We're going to present things that we think are really interesting. Your challenge is to learn from them, to see how you might want to adapt from them, what you like, what you dislike, and also push the boundaries where you think you can take it. Although, for anyone who wants creatine in a coffee, I'd say that's not a bad idea anyway. So 10 things I'm going to talk to you about today. That was five. There's the other five. And they are titled like this. Now, there's no point in me laboring on them because I'm going to tell you all about them. But the third R, Renaissance, health as a habit, a coffee ritual, quote, previous slide, the buzz without the booze, better for you everything, function and experience, reshaping supply, the last frontier, bang for buck, and rescue remedies. These are all things that we have been studying, looking in depth at. We're seeing as a natural consequence of our work of charting massive product repositories for everything that you would find in a functional food store or into a major functional grocer. These are the key things that we are seeing. So, with no further ado, let's get stuck in and hopefully you can find some interesting areas to learn, adapt, and potentially support evolution. Number one is the third R, Renaissance. So for a long time, we've always presented redefine and reimagine. Now, I think you can redefine, reimagine, or look for Renaissance. Now, I'm very big on this point, which is if we have to truly provide the architecture of our industry, it is remarkably stable. There's not many people who've come up with a new format or a new ingredient that we've not seen before. So the whole point here is that the footprint is stable. Needs and populations largely remain unchanged, although definitions definitely don't. But it's familiar and it's about putting things in today's consumers. Now, I'm just going to frame that redefine is almost a new definition, purpose or meaning. And I think a good example of that is redefining whey protein from non-animal sources. Reimagine is to envision something in a different way. And I actually think the original driver of that was protein bars going into healthy confectionery. In terms of renaissance, I think it's all about weight management, stimulated through GLP-1. So the trend is not GLP-1, the trend is the renaissance of weight management and creatine, because to all intents and purposes, creatine hasn't changed. It's not been redefined per se. It's not being re-envisioned. It's creatine doing what it's always done. People have just cottoned onto it and it's gone to a new stratospheric level. So let me have a look at the renaissance of weight management. From a GLP-1 point of view, of which has stimulated this trend, there's three sort of consumer groups. Now, I don't want to get lost in the GLP-1 user because that's related to them, and that's the companion products. But you have a lot of people who've come off GLP-1, about 50% of people every year, and they need particular help because they've lost a lot of weight And if you note here, they are massively into calorie control and positive management around hunger, satiety, and the relationship with food. They have to build their relationship with food again because, of course, they've not been eating a great deal. So the thoughts of calorie control and positive management of hunger, satiety are absolutely crucial. Of course, you have a much broader group and you can pen portrait these consumers into broader categories if you want. But I am on a health weight management kick because we are now more sensitive to the world of GLP-1, that we're all now rethinking how we look and feel. And if we're positive about that, that people are thinking about protein and fiber, hydration and blood glucose control, all sits within this ecosystem of how to look at weight management. Now, we are seeing a massive increase in things that would fall into a definition or bucket of meal replacements. Now, that could be meal replacement, old school definition, think Slim Fast, just been sold. This could be a new school definition, think complete food, think high growth like Huel or Y food. It could be anything in between, because to be fair, whilst there is a literal nutritional health claims regulation for low calorie food, um, meal replacements can mean anything. So there's no one defined definition of what a good meal is. I will just say there's a lot of people providing, let's just call it complete quote unquote solutions. Even the new light version of Huel plays perfectly into this role. I think the area of clear protein drinks, again, we are seeing a massive increase in clear protein drinks. In fact, it's pretty much the only protein category from a powder or drinks point of view that is in kind of net growth of new products launched minus those that are delisted. And we already know that GLP-1 users are full, or people who don't want to consume that much, don't want to, they want to get their sustenance in. So clear protein beverages, that Isopure is 32 grams. So in this instance, maybe more is better. Innovation by communication. There are a lot of people taking the same product and they're re-engaging claims around hunger and satiety. That's perfect for protein and it's fiber. So we get a lot of questions around should as a brand who's not traditionally in weight management or GLP-1, do we have permission to launch in that? And of course, you don't necessarily need to write weight or GLP-1 on anything. You could just build an entire platform around better management of calorie control, hunger, satiety, and loads of elements around that, to which, of course, all those traditional weight management products, glucomannan and things like that, have been available for a very long time. People might not necessarily buy into them this over time, but they could now be a factor moving forward. We are seeing the return of fat burners and shredding products, whether you like them or not my thing, but taking this night shred in the bottom left-hand corner, but also they're playing to in things about satiety and cravings. In the bottom right-hand corner, wow, I think this whole area of this functional food and food platforms becomes really interesting again. So that could be dried ambient version. So imagine adding hot water into a pouch, a little bit like a pot noodle. It could be sort of the recumbent version, so those that you just put into the microwave. Of course, it could be a better for you meal. Think My Proteins work, or in this instance, Gold Standard Nutrition. And of course, it could be a food delivery system. All of these areas are seeing huge interest and breadth of on the back of the renaissance of weight management. Now, in terms of the things that I think will move forward in this space that we're all seeing a lot of, I think we're going to see a huge amount of work around calorie control and portion sizing, but in a positive way. So it's not about count the calories, which feels inherently negative. I do think we're going to see a lot of calorie control, portion size, and positivity thinking around meals like Gold Standard Nutrition, Huel, food pots, and so on, to which there is a lot of. We're going to see a lot more movement towards re-emphasizing of hunger and satiety-based claims, or to what can be claimed in that area, or to the ingredients that will, of course, promote those feelings. I think obviously protein is an obvious one, but it's everywhere. I think fiber potentially could be the big winner in this space, unquestionably in terms of natural GLP-1 production, and also satiety management. I also think you're going to see a lot of brands bring into the fore more systems. So when I say the 1, 2, 3 formula, basically I mean have this here, have that there, and have this later on in the evening. A little bit like what Slim Fast and Weight Watchers have done. Now you might be sitting there thinking Slim Fast has just gone or passed on in terms of acquisition to Supreme in the UK. Weight Watchers definitely is not in a great place, but believe me, there are a lot more people who can create the positive approach to the renaissance of weight management about the same principles, the same ingredients, and it doesn't all have to state GLP-1. So think about the fact that for the next few years, we are going to be in a swathe of information around weight management. And I think the challenge here is how that's going to be presented to the consumer from brands that's done in a positive way, but is effectively playing into the basic principles that have always existed around sort of calories in, calories out, and any of the other basic things around hunger, satiety, and so on. Now, from a creatine point of view, that has had massive renaissance. Now, we do a lot of collection in creatine, and in this table, you can see that we're already collecting or looking or tracking 3,000 products that might be a creatine only product, top line. Creatine plus, think, um, the best creatines that exist that also have a few other actives in. You get creatine electrolytes combined together. You get creatine in pre-workouts, in protein bars, to which there's now 13, and you get a lot of creatine in protein powders. I just want to point out that we are already tracking 124 creatine gummy products. Now, that I would imagine should be a surprise to everybody because basically we are already finding that most people assume there might be 40 or 50. There's already 124 creatine independent products that exist. That's not SKUs. So to some extent, the renaissance of creatine has been driven by new formats. Now, we'll not discuss the fact that we do need good testing to know that creatine is in those products, of course, and the stability and so on. I'm just saying these are out there, definitely not playing any comment on the quality. I wouldn't know. They are there, and that's a big driver. But what creatine has done very well is it's found new populations, creatine for women. It's found new benefits, creatine for the brain. You can't really see on this image particularly well, but there's a little icon of a brain in there. And they've also done an incredible job of moving into very mainstream formats. So you can see Lifeway with the Muscle Mates. That's a US-based brand. So that's protein and creatine. That's protein and creatine in a drink, by the way, which a lot of people would discuss about the stability of that. You've now got creatine in yogurts in Germany. Creatine in yogurts. It's like, that's a blow your mind type scenario. And you've also have got more creatine coffees to what I've already shown you. So the fact that creatine has materialized into all of these, it's effectively become a daily essential. So it's had a significant renaissance. It's broadened out of its stereotype, which you know. So the learning here is, like weight management, there's a huge renaissance here. So the question is, of course, what could be the next big renaissance that could go down this route? And maybe there is a lot of learning in the profile of looking at creatine into new formats, for example, that is something that you should be aware of. But that would be a big space for you to look at. The next one is health is a habit. I do love this one. Becoming part of the consumer's daily routine is harder than it sounds. So habits take time to form and supplements are easily forgotten. I'm definitely one of those. We have cupboards full of supplements which we start to forget to take. Why? Travel, kids, loads of reasons. So they get left on the side. But what if the habit is already existing and the innovation is really about boosting or enhancing that? Now, actually, the whole learning for why hydration took off is because it is a habit that we do every single day. Um, and if all I need to do is take the habit and make it better, then I don't need to convince someone of doing the solution in a time point in a day that doesn't already exist. There is two things I want to talk about. Hydration is the first, which in itself is a habit and a thing that we do, but we've boosted it with more electrolytes. And of course, you can just take any form of booster and boost any other habit that exists. So if I was to look at hydration, the Google Trend search will only emphasize a couple of really important things. We put two lines on here for electrolytes and hydration. Look at the blue line for electrolytes. This is in the UK, same mimicked for US, same mimicked for Germany. The yellow line, just as a benchmark, is protein powder, just because it's kind of in this ecosystem. And you can see that people are searching for electrolytes as much as they are for protein, for example. It's really interesting that people have done so. And now I absolutely love the evolution here. And I think there's another learning that's indirect in this chart, which is stick packs. So we've had effervescence for a very long time. We've had tubs of powder, but the majority of products that we track, nearly 2,000 electrolyte products, more and more of those are in powdered format and in stick packs. Is stick packs solely for the hydration? No, it could be in creatine. There's actually a hydration and protein stick pack, would you believe, with only 5 grams of protein. So the stick pack delivery is a really interesting one, which also promotes the idea of creating health into a habit. Now, in this instance, I just think it's worth reflecting that Waterboy do an amazing job at framing hydration for 3 use cases. So they've got daily hydration, hydration for the workout, and I love this one as well, which is the weekend recovery. I think it's pretty much explicit what we mean by that. And then also, if you do want to further differentiate, because I think Waterboy do a great job with their look and feel of it, because I think the use cases are remarkably generational relevant, but also Dry Water have done a great job by saying, well, how else do you communicate and differentiate in hydration, which is broadly salt and water? Of course, you could add magnesium and potassium, and you could go with a coconut base or more of a numbers base. I got 1,000 milligrams of something in. They've gone down the simple approach of calling it cellular hydration. I say it's simple. I think it's actually remarkably simplified sophistication, but they've discussed the buzz around cells and cellular health and added in cellular hydration around some of those benefits. So it's already a habit, and that habit, which is something we do all throughout the day, is being pimped or boosted, for want of a better expression, by electrolytes and now greater function. And that is a really interesting thing because if you take that as a learning, we're also seeing a significant amount of other things that are being boosted. So if you want to take electrolytes, it doesn't just need to be in the water. This is an electrolyte infused coffee. I showed you the creatine infused coffee. If you want to go further, you can have an electrolyte infused coffee. So you can boost your hot drink. It doesn't need to be the coffee that gets boosted per se. You could have a functional creamer which adds into the coffee. Now, to some extent, this is again a secular process that's come around. We've been doing MCTs from Bulletproof and coffee for ages. You could go to Mudwater in the US with mushrooms and adaptogens going into hot drinks. But we are seeing significant boosting of all occasions that we see throughout the day. And one of the biggest ones is the hot drink. Once you've done coffee, you can do tea. Once you've done tea, you can do a hot chocolate. Once you've done a hot chocolate, you can do a matcha. Just keep on going. And then beyond that, it doesn't just have to be the hot drink. Although I would say, as a family, N of one, the one area that we have boosted the most is definitely around the hot drinks. It's even where we carry. And again, what works well for people in our lives that travel? Love a stick pack. The galacto-oligosaccharides on the first slide is a really good example. And if you go further, Greenora do one just for fruits and vegetables. Maybe it's a bit child orientated, but again, stick packs for fitness, greens boost well-being, adding more in. Again, it's not massively new, but the learning is about how do you find synergies with existing habits that you can boost to remove the barriers of ingraining better nutritional habits. Now, the final one is more. They have their chunky flavor. Now, I'll just point out that this in itself is not functional. It's just got most things not added to it, or it's got no nasties. Do you know what the one area that I genuinely believe could go a lot further is the pre-bed. Everyone's desperate to give you a cool liquid or a supplement. We've tried casein, but I honestly believe the future in overnight recovery, pre-bed solutions is about finding how you will boost an existing habit that we do. It could be the hot drink, by the way, could be a yogurt or dessert, could be loads of things in that space. Now, number three, a coffee ritual. You've already seen that coffee has become a vehicle for adding more benefits to it. But it goes further than that. And I tell you why it goes further to it is we're already seeing coffee because we love coffee. Obviously, that's not everyone, but a large number of people do it. So we're seeing protein and coffee come together. So in this instance, you've got Soylent and you've got protein and energy from Premier in America. Now, coffee is much more than a daily habit. Of course, it's a ritual, and we've been there before, but it's a massive way to embed it. Now, I've told you about boosting it. What about just the collaborations of just the coffee flavor? Is it coffee the drink or is it coffee the benefit? Now, in this instance, you've got the coffee as a drink with Soylent. The protein and energy is about the benefit of protein combining with a coffee flavor, but with caffeine. Um, Now, we have seen a lot of protein coffees being launched into the market. Now, this is something that a few people have seen before. Now, if you're in the protein world, this is really interesting because if you see the ingredients list at the bottom, it is a whey protein concentrate that is in 501 kg pouch that is around about £30 per kilo. This protein coffee for 17 grams of coffee is sold at a £5 premium to just finding whey protein concentrate on its own. That's more of an FYI. And why do I think that's important? Is because when you create a product that's a protein coffee, it decouples itself from the original sort of protein architecture and it becomes more of an experience and it becomes a really interesting thing that people want. Note that you are seeing elements of roasted beans, so a particular type of bean maybe, or a quality of bean. You're seeing people call out the exact amount of caffeine going into these. So that's really interesting. So there's this whole protein coffee thing that keeps on going. And if you go even further, you can go into America and find protein coffee is or directly impacting the coffee. So Starbucks have their protein drinks with coffee. You can now get protein foam to go in the coffee. And then now you can replace the caffeine from the coffee. You could put it in a bar and call it Eat My Coffee, to which there is another brand called Eat My Coffee, but it's a bar with caffeine. So the whole thing here is about how are we engaging with these habits and behaviors? Now, where does this go? I'd be absolutely surprised if we don't see more Starbucks type options moving forward. I also think you'll see collaborations with some sort of coffee beans, although I don't know how familiar they are to consumers. Um, but I think you'll see some people talking about the uniqueness of the roast beans from this particular provenance in the Amazon or something, and that will come through. I do think you're going to see more drive towards protein and energy. It's a bit of a sort of an adjacency, but protein and energy coming together, as you've seen in here, I think you're going to see a lot more protein and energy type propositions. I think you're going to go from coffee, you're going to go to tea. And when you get to tea, it already exists. You're going to be in matcha. And there's a massive boom already about matchas, the functionality of matchas, the perception of health of matcha, but also coming back into sort of the matcha type hot drink uniqueness of the flavor experience. You're going to see more hot drink ritual platforms. So people are going to build stuff to drink with your coffee that's also pumped. They're going to have like a bar or more snacks, but they're going to feel more intrinsic to the coffee. And you're also going to see some interesting channel diversity. It's not been the easiest channel for many brands to permeate, but getting into the coffee channel is going to be interesting. The on-trade or sort of the out of home and the food service type space. So you're going to see coffee as a huge vehicle. The buzz without the booze is, I just think, is one of these trends that's stratospheric, to be perfectly honest. So in this instance, you need to think about the fact that as younger generations take a different approach to alcohol, what began as low and no is moving into sort of this buzz and the calm connection. So it's people who want to drink in a social setting, they still want the moment, but they don't want to drink alcohol. Or in some instances, generations have not really grown up with alcohol. So this is an important context, and you can have a direct no and low equivalent. So this is real. This is a kombucha in what we would describe as a cork and cage. And on the right-hand side, you've got Trip, which has been a CBD drink, also more lately magnesium, talking about how they're alcohol free and you should drink this because you would have no regrets, no anxiety. That was the whole platform going through. So there's a real blurred lines. And I'm going to ask you this question. We've known that there's been a growth in no and low alcohol for quite some time, but there is a really important generational shift. Now, if you know me, then this is normal. I am 45 and not ashamed to say it. I've grown up as a generation having had alcohol in my life. So if I go in my social setting, my context of a low alcohol drink is to have a beer with no alcohol. Wine, no alcohol. Younger generations are not drinking as much as older generations, and so they are not looking in that social occasion for a no or low equivalent. They are just going, well, any drink goes. Just think about that. Any drink goes. So, what is the difference between a no and low alcohol drink and a soft drink or a functional drink? Nothing. Maybe the moment, maybe the experience. Also think, yes, you shop alcohol and alcohol-free alternatives, and you shop functional drinks in the future. I just wonder if even that will change, and that will be a massively disruptive dynamic. In the UK alone, 39% of 18 to 24-year-olds do not drink. They are the most sober age group overall. And in Germany, 49% of 18 to 24-year-olds say they do not drink alcohol at all, combined to 41%, by the way, and 45 to 54%. So what do they drink? What do they drink when they go out? Because people are still socializing. People are still networking. Everyone in Vegas next week is going to socialize. So what are they drinking? The reality is they're drinking lots of different opportunities. Now, in this instance, this is about functional sort of tonics and spirits. So you've got Mother Root, which is an aperitif. That's organic apple cider vinegar, blossom honey, ginger and chili extract. And then you've got Three Spirit, which is looking at botanical elixirs. Again, apple cider vinegar is the common denominator. In fact, that's the same one as the other one. So I've not put the right ingredients list in that. So forgive me for that. I'll get it in there for you. But I just wanted to point out that, when you go into a product description, how good is this? That the product description for Three Spirit is how it tastes, how to drink it, and how it feels. How it feels. I can't begin to tell you how important that is to this whole context. How it feels. Because this is about how are you wanting to feel? Do you want to feel up? Do you want to feel more moody? What do you want to feel in these social equivalents? Now, I will point out, look, the drinks are all with ice. They've all got some herbs in. They're all creating something. If you go to a party and someone just gives you a Diet Coke in a tumbler, you're kind of not getting the same experience that everyone is currently hugging, high-fiving by getting a beautiful sort of champagne glass with a drink in it. The whole point here is there's got to be a integration of the experience you get from No and Low, that you still get the celebratory, cherish the moment scenario. But I do think there's so much here that is going to happen. Now, where could this go? Of course, where does it stop? Like, we've got electrolyte drinks. Of course, you're likely to drink down a gym. Barbells as protein soda. You've got incredible new energy drinks stripped down. That naked drink is actually talking about the caffeine from coffee. Again, coffee. Huel's Daily Greens, you've got fiber drinks, and I just love the fact that in America you can sell sparkling water, and it's called not beer. It's a big deal. Now, do I think that Nocco electrolyte drink is going to be brought out and served with an ice and a slice and a little bit of thyme in a certain cool drink in a party? Not necessarily. But do I think an electrolyte drink could? Absolutely. Do I think there's a huge mileage for protein waters and sodas in this element? Massively. Could you put some other interesting ingredients on that base? Fundamentally, yes. I'll also just point, there's another indirect trend in here. They're all cans. Just want to point out they're all cans for functional drinks in an RTD opportunity. So it just keeps on going. Better for you everything. I'm going to talk to you about this through the lens of protein because we do a lot of protein. But I think this is really important. So protein has been the buzzword. It's been a buzz ingredient for longer than anyone expected. In fact, the idea that at Expo West this year we thought that protein was a trend again sort of made people think that's a crazy thing to say because it's so well established. But it just keeps on evolving and proliferating. And it has very much set a precedent for becoming functional anything. Now, if you can put protein in sprinkles to put on a cake, then you can basically confirm that there are no rules in the game anymore. And that is 5 grams of protein per 17-gram sachet of sprinkles. You can also just stick electrolytes, just going back to that, in a cordial. Now, I used to work for Lucozade Sport, and we used to have a cordial for elite partners. And actually, this is really interesting because it's just a cordial that's now become an electrolyte drink. Now, of course, that could be somewhere in the middle and that could be functional. Now, this is the proliferation of protein. There is not one format in the grocery aisle that does not have protein in it. So by definition, it has become a better for you everything. I'm just going to say also that the protein candy is an interesting one. because we have already now got near 50 brands of protein gummies. We've got 124 gummies for creatine. We're getting a quick acceleration of protein gummies too. And I think that is going to be interesting because those gummies, creatine and protein, the dynamic's quite different to a traditional like multivitamin gummy. What I want to also point out to you in this chart is that as you go into snacking formats, rightly or wrongly, they tend to be using less whey protein. So when I say whey protein, people associate that with quality, and quite rightly so. That doesn't mean to say other protein sources are not quality, but we're talking optimal. But as you go into these ready-to-eat formats, bars, cereal, chips, ice cream, and there's a smattering of products under analysis, then the grey refers to the amount of products that don't use whey protein. The orange is they use whey protein only, and the turquoise is it's a hybrid, but it must have whey protein in it. The point is there is a lot of grey. What's the message? That as you proliferate using protein as the lens, you tend to get more scrutiny on the quality of the ingredient, but more about the balance between taste and function. I will just point out that as soon as you create protein in everything, you get microdynamics where suddenly a protein bar has to compete with a protein yogurt. And so it's not a big tidal wave of success for everyone. But where else could this go? There's loads of platforms for functionality. Dairy is the best aisle you can possibly find. Honestly, if you go down a grocery store in any European country and in America, the dairy aisle has immunity, it has gut health, immune health, high protein, muscle, even got GLP-1. It's an aisle like unbeknown to any other aisle in a grocery store that is very inherently functional. And it's having the function added even further. We're seeing more bars with benefits. So a bar that's got lion's mane in it, again, in the US, it's been around, but again, bars, and once you're in bars, you can go to something else. We're seeing more confectionery with benefits. So not just confectionery that's low sugar, we're getting confectionery with vitamins and minerals being added, and we're getting a lot of chocolate. So in this instance, premium chocolate for energy and sleep. So maybe the idea is we can do a better job at boosting our pre-bed snack, in this instance, chocolate, might be an avenue that people who have already gone down that route, it might become a bit of a bigger deal. But significant like platforms for function where it's effectively a better for you everything. Um, that does move us seamlessly into the idea of discussing function and experience. So I love this little anecdote. If you don't like the taste of eggs, then just add chocolate, flour, sugar, baking soda, and some butter, and we'll get there. And of course, the whole point here is there's this horrible balance of, but we know we need taste and texture if we're going to be more achievable to more people. But also at the same time, we want traditional good nutrition, both inherently important ingredients, but also the numbers. So how much protein do you want? How much sugar do we want to remove? And so on. But that has an indirect impact on taste. So is it function or experience? It's a real important balancing act. And honestly, I'm convinced there's going to have to be some important changes. Like we still want to make a protein bar follow the exact same macronutrients that we always have, and we assume we're going to make it significantly better tasting. We can make it better tasting, but in the industry we can see the change. But there's an industry of consumers that don't know protein bars like we do. Are they seeing the same degree of change versus the taste of a Mars bar, for example? This is Grenade, and it's high protein, 20 grams and 1.8 grams. On the right-hand side is the top flavors of protein bars. They're all super confectionery. So if we're going to make the best tasting chocolate bar that's high in protein, something still has to give, right? That is a nice bar, but there's definitely a lot of mileage to go in terms of making them better. I'm just going to point out, and I hope it's okay because I can see some people on here. I'm going to point out Myprotein. I think they've done an interesting job, actually. And I couldn't tell you if this is why they've done it, but I just think the learning here is interesting. At the top, you've got the Bro bar or their latest bar, the Impossible to Name bar. I'm just going to point out that it's 16 grams of protein and the sugars are 6.5 grams of sugar per serving. Like a protein bar has been for a long time stereotyped at 20 grams. We know the protein in those bars have been decreasing generally over time, but that's more due to numbers, not the biggest sellers. So to have a bar that's 16 grams and to have 6.5 grams of sugar in it is suggesting that people are having conversations around nutritional benchmarks in order to meet the balance between nutrition and taste, because this bar does taste great. There's even very much a consensus to recreate a toffee crisp or toffee crunch. And again, you can see 4 grams of protein in this bar. The sugar is kept relatively low. The protein is different. My point being is that some people are going to have to make big discussion calls about changing the benchmarks. And in fact, the more we look, people are already shifting traditional benchmarks slowly but surely to find the balance of taste and function. Who's to say 16 grams is not good enough compared to 20? No one. Is 6 grams of sugar immensely worse than 2 grams, but you get a lot more other ingredients? Huge debate to have. Um, Personally, I think there's more balance to be found, and in order to meet the requirements of making better for you products, I think this balance is going to be the crux of innovation challenges. I'll also just point out that in protein bars, we've seen a lot of people redefining. So the Built Bar, what they've done in order to create not just function and experience. So in this instance, I'm really driving on the idea that not only do you have to have function, but it's got to be memorable. I have a massive bee in my bonnet about protein bars, all calling themselves a protein bar, all having the top five flavors in some form or another, and almost not being hugely differentiated, but asking each other why and how they can differentiate. Built have created a protein bar by definition, but it feels more like a sort of marshmallowy type bar, which I think is interesting. And Ghost have recreated the Twix. What have they done? They've created definable protein bars that are unopposed in terms of competition as it stands today. And they've created something that is more of an experience as well as delivering the function. So there is a function or experience balance between function and the taste, and the nutritional benchmarks. But there is also the balance between saying you can't just create function, you've got to give more of a so what moment. And at least in these two examples, they're more memorable than any other protein bar that I've certainly tried in quite some time. Reshaping the supply chain. This is a really important one. Again, you could look through the lens of whey protein, but I'll look at fermentation shortly. Honestly, I know there's going to be questions about scale, price, and whether consumers get narratives. They're all very much there. The reality is there are a lot of supply chain challenges that exist, and we will and are already seeing a lot of the reshaping of the supply chain. Um, One of the interesting ones that I'm going to look at is whey protein. So this is a chart on the left about European brands, 600 of them, where 23% of those brands will have a clear whey. On the right in the US, 400 brands, 9% of those brands have a clear whey. The percentage of the other verticals refers to a whey protein concentrate, a whey blend, think gold standard whey, and also a whey protein isolate. The point is that we would love to increase the amount of clear whey proteins in the market because the demand is there, but there is not as much demand supply of that ingredient. So where is the clear whey going to come from? It has to come from the pool of whey protein isolate. There needs to be more clear whey. But if you provide more, it might not be as premium. So there's an interesting dynamic there. The point is, people would like more clear whey, and probably the only way it's going to come is if you find whey from non-animal sources. So Vivici and Remilk are two examples. There are more. So no direct interests from us in this instance. But just to point out that Vivici and Remilk are there, and there is a clear advantage for people to decouple the raw material from a volatile sort of commodity supply chain, cost control, resilience, and that maybe fermentation is a really good solution. Now, caveat, price, problem. Caveat, supply, is there enough? It'll come. I think it's coming this year already. People have overhyped the narrative being the important thing. The reality is the narrative here is about supply chain reshaping, and this is going to happen. And I'm almost certain there'll be some launches coming over the next 6 months, which will change the scope of this narrative around non-dairy dairy or away from non-animal sources. And inherently, what it does do, if the price can be a good price, it will help manage the volatility of the whey protein supply. Bigger message, fit for purpose supply chain manufacturing moving forward is happening now. There's techniques going, and maybe it's also worth looking at other companies. So the Protein Brewery, with their fermentation facilitation techniques at the moment, they have a mycelium powder, comes from fungi, that's 50% protein. It's also high in fibers, but it also comes rich in an ingredient called spermidine. Again, just more framing from a factual point of view, but there are a lot of next generation ingredients which I think are going to influence a lot of new products. In this instance, it's quite an interesting one because effectively it's biomass. And I actually just think, on reflection, there'll be new words like biomass will become inherent in our language. I don't think they're there today, but I do think they'll become inherent in the future and actually more fit for purpose supply chain is going to make a big deal. Number eight, and we're on to the last three. This is the last frontier of identity politics. Um, it's always started as biohacking. It's been quite a sort of wealthy type approach, thinking about Brian Johnson in the top left, bottom left, sorry, with the principles of trying not to die. But Emil Rathband in the bottom right, he went to court to try and change his age because he felt he was younger. And I think the key here is you've got some people looking at longevity, which is the category through the lens of living forever, and you've got others who are living longevity in the moment. And I guess that's important. So don't think about this as biohacking only. Think about this as those that might biohack, but also think about those from a longevity point of view that also want to live better in the moment. And in fact, one of the things that people refer to most about the centenarians, which is the blue zones, which the top picture refers to, is the fact that centenarians live for so long because of living in the moment and having a community. And that inherent sort of get the most out of life, being fearless, and optimizing your life and maximizing it in the here and now is perhaps the most practical output of the longevity trend. That doesn't mean to say people don't want products that are cellular health relevant or hallmarks of aging, but that's one key point. Now, I've never thought in my life I would have a slide with Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping on there. But I think it is important that they were caught on a hot mic recently where they had a vision for immortality, which I think in itself is quite scary. But with the development of biotechnology, human organs can continuously be transplanted and people can live for younger and younger and achieve immortality. There's a chance, he continued, Vladimir Putin said, of living to 150. I don't want to live to 150. Some people do actually want to live for 150. Maybe they want to live for 150 because they don't want to necessarily lose all the power that they currently have. The point being is there's definitely a lot of people thinking about this. They are talking about it, and products are being developed around the hallmarks of aging. But I must say, and I must state, this is not solely biohacking. This is solely not for the wealthy. It is now about living in the moment. And maybe the final frontier of identity politics is removing the barriers of age and just saying, live in the moment. You can be any age. And we're already seeing longevity-based bars, 15 grams of protein, by the way, because protein goes in everything, some vitamins and minerals and some superfoods. And you can see here that they've already adapted the function and experience by also having a longevity science, renowned dietitian, and a chef from the French three-star French Laundry restaurant. What does that mean? We're credible, science. We're practical, nutrition, and we taste good, chef. Incredible example. And also, just to emphasize that health is a habit, but also living in the moment, that longevity doesn't have to be super biohacking. It could be about performance, vitality, and longevity. And that youthful are talking about boosting longevity so you can squeeze the most out of every day. Every day. Penultimate trend, bang for buck, is this whole idea of 1 + 1 = 3. The concept that as wellness expands, so does the list of supplements. I mean, honestly, the choice of supplements that you could take these days is incredible. There's a limit to what we can consume and how much we're willing to spend. And I just don't think there's that many occasions in a day, which is also why health is the habit and pimping a habit is actually a really important strategy. I think to win, brands need to be more complete. Now, there's a couple of ways you could approach this. We're seeing some interesting ones. And I guess I would ask the question to you all. Like, if you take supplements, how many do you really take? And if you were to take one, which one would it be? So we're seeing loads of mashups. So take electrolytes, trend. Take collagen, oh, trend. Take creatine, bloody hell, renaissance. Put them together. Take creatine again, magnesium biglycinate, top of the mind, pardon the pun. Pop it together. We're seeing lots of things like that. We're also seeing ingredients leverage superfoods. Now, so the AMRA version is a really good one. One whole food, 400 bioactives, 1,000 health benefits. So, in some respects, emphasizing that it doesn't have to just be multiple ingredients coming together as a mashup. It can be a single ingredient doing multiple things. You could argue, or I'm sure a lot of people would talk about creatine in the same way. So, this whole broader lens of offering value, you've got to have more bang for your buck in today's world. The other thought that we're seeing is more systems, modules, and capsules. So the Women's Three, your daily essentials from the Performance for Life from Momentous, is taking some very basic examples of iron, calcium, and vitamin 3. But what they're doing in terms of offering bang for buck is they're actually putting it all together for you. They're creating a whole system of the way they're putting stuff together for women's health through the lens of a sports nutrition brand in America. So there's some really interesting things to do the one, two, three, almost what I referred to before. And finally, I'm just going to talk about rescue remedies. Um, I don't honestly, we talk about proactive nutrition. I'm big on proactive nutrition. I love it. But we do paint this picture of everyone like optimizing and maximizing, and it almost creates this link of people forgetting that at the heart of all of this is the fact that most people are trying to rectify a challenge or a problem. Um, and that just because you're healthy doesn't also mean you don't have an ailment or something that you were looking to solve. And so we forget also that just life doesn't always go to plan. It's gritty, it's hard work. Honestly, who on this call does not live on the edge? Who is not almost going, oh, I can feel myself just breaking down because we're working hard, traveling, exercising too much. So supplements aren't always about like being perfection. And sometimes it's presented that way. And we're seeing more people refer to relief and like giving people the confidence that we can help them. And in fact, the whole idea that most things that we do is rescue remedies. So we always have this dilemma. Is it about proactivity? Is it about being reactive? Or is this really about loads of proactive consumers reacting to the challenges they've got? There's so much going on in this space, and I think it's a really nice place to finish. Now, if you're in need of the perfect poo, then you could go to We Are Regular. I just love the way that they've even innovated here around the communication. It's only £1.60 for the perfect poo. I've never seen that before. But I'll just point out the Relief and also Awaken. And if you take this, constipated, bloated, both, we get it. We've been there. It's about a rescue. It's about a rescue. It's not, oh, we can help you have the perfect gut health. You'll feel so much better and brighter and you'll live longer. I mean, that's all wonderful. But the reality is, someone's going, honestly, I know what it feels like to be you. Sat on that toilet. It's pretty horrible. We can help you. We're a rescue remedy. So let's be proactive about reacting to the solution or the problems you've got. Also, listen to Awaken. So, reflecting on their own struggles, again, it's a user founder story, with alcohol hangovers and demanding social schedules. So, anyone who's in Vegas networking next week, um, sisters decided they would wanted to create something to help people enjoy their social nights whilst being able to be productive the next day. What a perfect example of the rescue remedy. In this instance, is of course living or burning the candle at both ends, but it's a kind of a really interesting space. Something for you to bear in mind. Now, the stats on the right-hand side just refer to the fact that combining both mild and moderate symptoms, 21% of the EU population experience some form of depressive symptoms, mild and sort of moderate. Loads of people in Europe, again, have sort of, are not feeling great mentally every day. If you go into menopause, people are feeling tired. Like everyone needs a rescue remedy. Sometimes we present things inherently different to the solution that we're actually solving. And we're seeing more people actually awaken, pardon the pun, to the idea of saying we are here to help you rescue this moment because honestly, life is not perfect. So, um, I did also reflect how long it would take me to present this, but I get excited, so sorry about that. 2026 and beyond is those 10 things that we are seeing, tracking, I don't know, 20,000 brands and hundreds of thousands of products across multiple product data sets, looking what comes in, what goes out. This is the areas that people are really adapting to, but these are not areas of innovation per se. These are principles. These are principles that are defining innovation today and for tomorrow. You couple that with redefine and reimagine, then you need to or should be in a good space. So the question would be, of course, to finish on, what did you see? What can you learn, adapt, and where do you want to take it in the future? Because I think there's some really cool stuff in there, no matter whether you're coming from a brand, a category, an ingredient, or a format point of view. So, with that, of course, I've got 5 minutes for questions, which I can see. So, if anyone would like to ask a question, then I'm happy to try and answer it now. Otherwise, forever hold thy peace. And we will be in touch to the question that was asked. You will get a slides, you'll get a link to the recording. And if anyone wants to understand how we can tailor this presentation to you as a company in terms of thinking about the trends for 2026 and what it means for you specifically, then do please get in touch. 5 minutes left for questions. If I don't get a question in the next 30 seconds, then I think you can all drop off. Thank you for listening, and thanks for turning up. Oh, do you see protein powder being used in the savory food market? Um, yes, possibly. Might be more plant-based, maybe. I do see it. I don't see there's any reason why you would. Now, of course, in the food market, you would inherently have high protein foods contributing to that. But I don't see a reason, of course, why protein powders wouldn't be included. I suppose it also does come back to what definition of food. Are you talking about a meal? But I would say that I think there's a lot of opportunities for adding protein and solutions into how can I boost my salad? How can I boost my rice? How can I boost my, and that may or may not be a protein powder per se, but I think there's lots of interesting ways that you'll see people through maybe oils or condiments or other things that you could add and boost food as much as just always being the basic yogurts and shakes. Just going down. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. See you soon. Renaissance is an interesting concept. What is another category undergoing? I guess that's a challenge for you, really. Definitely weight management is under a renaissance. Creatine is under a renaissance. You could argue hydration, which has never gone away, has been a big category for a long time. It's massive renaissance because again, it's doing exactly what it said on the tin. So that's another third one. Colostrum is having one of its own level, albeit on a more niche point. That's having its renaissance because people have known that for a while. But again, people are seeing the benefits that it brings through. So there's a couple of different levels of maturation or potential commercial size. Um, Tobias, we can pick that one up offline, which is fine. Do I think protein coffee is going to carry on booming? I do. I don't think I see a ceiling for it, to be perfectly truthful. I don't see a ceiling. I just think coffee is too inherent into the way a large volumes of populations drink, to be honest, and protein is the just most obvious surrogate for health that currently exists in our industry. So the only thing that would stop it is supply of protein, probably. Um, Two questions. Slide 16, you mentioned the pictures are all cans. Do you think there's more to do with convenience, grab and go? I think it's generational and I think it's status, actually. So to be truthful, I think the can is more intrinsic to the way people actually feel that they look when they're drinking, than it does now drinking out of a PAT bottle. That doesn't mean to say that's not the right option. I just think there's a lot of probably perception about how people feel status within a can. There's definitely different parameters development wise of what you need to be to go into a can. That's not my expertise, I must add. But I think that's something to bear in mind. Also, you mentioned functional ingredients. Do you think this could also come from natural provenance flavors? Yeah, good question. Um, yeah, it could. Of course it could. Yes, is a simple answer to that. Yes. So that's enough for you, Joe, on that. GLP-1 sits as a little separate as weight management is a key driver, but GLP-1 is interesting. But GLP-1 is impacting multi-industry. Yes, I'm not sure what the question is. I just think it's absolutely significant. Oh, it's been adapted. GLP-1 sits a little separate as weight management as a key driver, but GLP-1 is impact multi-industry, so it will have huge implications for years to come. Totally agree. Totally agree. Fiber, can it follow the protein playbook? Absolutely. I think fiber's um, got a massive future, a massive future of fiber. It's been around for ages. I still think the levels of education and knowledge around it are quite low. There's a fiber gap. There's still a fiber quality to better understand. There's a fiber link to satiety and GLP-1 and weight management to get your head around. I think fiber becomes a really interesting facilitatory component of better health, in my humble opinion. Excellent. That's all the questions for now. It is now 4 o'clock. It's definitely time to take a break and go and have a healthy habit. So with that, I bid you a farewell. Please get in touch if there's anything else you want to know. And it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you, and look forward to seeing you soon. If anyone wants to write something positive about this presentation online, then please tag me in it. See you soon. Take care, and be in touch.